You. Yes, you. If you clicked on this video, you could be in one or several of these categories. You could be someone who loves the Dark Knight trilogy and thinks these films are just awesome. You could be someone who only loves one of these films, for example, just The Dark Knight. You could be someone who appreciates the filmmaking and storytelling aspects behind this trilogy, but has never really been invested just because you're not the biggest fan of the comic book genre. You could be someone who thinks this trilogy is overrated and have never really understood why so many people love it. You could be a hardcore Batman fan and despise these films. You could be a hardcore Batman fan and cherish these films. Or you could just be someone who loves watching movies. Either way, like any art form, film is subjective, and I'm here to tell you my personal viewpoint on Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Yes, I'm going to dive into the story, the characters, the performances, the action, but I'm also going to be talking about why I regard this trilogy so high as a lover of both the comic book genre and films of all variety. So, without further ado, let's get started. As with any film or series of films, we start with the beginning. In this case, Batman's beginning. As a kid growing up, Spider-Man's origin was my favorite, but as a teenager and now adult, the Dark Knight's origin is one that I regard with the highest of significance. I think when you look at who Batman truly is as a character, it all stems down to two definitive points in his life. The first is the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne in Crime Alley. In Batman Begins, the scene isn't drawn out in an overly dramatic manner or anything, but instead, Christopher Nolan chooses to make it very quick and abrupt, which adds to the realism of how a moment like this would really play out. I love how this final wide shot really makes Bruce look isolated and alone, two emotions that are often associated with the character of Batman. The second definitive moment, or in this case, series of moments, is Bruce's training with Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins. This is almost immediately shown after Bruce's loss of his mother and father, and is made possible due to Christopher Nolan's signature-like non-linear narrative structuring. I think this sequence has some of the best dialogue ever written in a comic book genre film. I love the lines, "You know how to fight 6 men, we can teach you how to engage 600, and you know how to disappear, we can teach you how to truly become invisible." I also love how Chris Nolan adapted the name League of Assassins to League of Shadows. I think I prefer it much more. The musical score by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard is beautiful, and I think one thing they really did well, particularly in Batman Begins, is capturing the real emotional complexities of Bruce Wayne as a character. But more about the score later. I think in the space of about 9 minutes, this first act of Batman Begins became one of my favourite first acts to a film ever. I said this in my review for Batman Begins, but when Bruce returns to Gotham, this film flies. The montage-like section of Bruce creating the identity of Batman is just brilliant. The gadgets, the tumbler, the Batcave, the Batsuit. As a kid, just looking at Bruce Wayne's arsenal was just the coolest thing ever. I think this whole segment of the film really established one of Batman's real superpowers, and that of course is his resourcefulness. Another thing I'd like to mention is Michael Caine as Alfred and Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox. This is the definition of casting perfection. Both characters are just so brilliant in their own ways. The dialogue written for them is so clever and witty, providing levity to these often dark and very serious films. I want to save my thoughts on Christian Bale's casting for later on in the video, but hats off to him in this film specifically, because in many ways, he's playing 4 different characters. He plays the current Bruce Wayne character, but earlier on we see the younger, less experienced, bit of a dick version of the character. Then we see the playboy Bruce Wayne, the act that he puts on for the public. And last but not least, we see the Dark Knight himself in all his glory. Not to forget, of course, the dedication that Bale brings to this role. From only 6 months before shooting, looking like this in The Machinist, to this. Very few actors in Hollywood can show this kind of physical commitment to a role, so hats off to Christian Bale. So then, after we get some awesome stuff with Batman, including an absolutely breathtaking Batmobile chase sequence, the plot really starts to head towards the climax. Actually, hold up, let's talk about that chase sequence. The fact that the tumbler was actually built to perform all these stunts is so brilliant and speaks volumes for Christopher Nolan's dedication to providing an immersive experience for the audience. I don't know if this is true, but apparently the sound of a lion roar and the engine were mixed to give us the noise of the Batmobile. Even if it's not true, you would have fooled me because the sound design of this vehicle is just so impressive. The Molossus soundtrack from the film score is so epic, and just a bit of advice, guys, do not listen to it while you're driving in your car. Anyways, back to the plot. With the help of Scarecrow, Ra's al Ghul and the League are back to watch Gotham tear itself apart through fear. Panic is everywhere in the Narrows, and I think this makes for a really frightening and intense environment for the final act to take place. Also, the fact that this is Bruce Wayne's master, friend, and father figure that is revealed to be the main antagonist makes the conflict in this final act feel so much more personal. I think Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul is so often overlooked and underappreciated just because the main villains in the sequels are so great. But what makes his villainy so investing for me, especially while rewatching this film over the years, is that Ra's is almost exactly identical to Bruce. His backstory, despite only being briefly explored in this film, tells the tale of his wife being taken from him and how it almost destroyed him. Then he trains in the mountains and eventually sets out on a mission to destroy criminals and eradicate the world from injustice. See the similarity here? When Batman is fighting Ra's here on a train, he's battling against a version of himself. Not only do I feel like the main antagonist is overlooked, but this whole film is overlooked. Even though I don't prefer it to its sequels, without Batman Begins to start this epic journey of one of the greatest fictional characters to ever be created, I simply don't think I would be as nearly as invested in the story of Bruce Wayne, as well as this gritty, realistic Gotham City created by none other than Christopher Nolan. One of the biggest reasons as to why I think The Dark Knight is as great as it is not just because of its complex and multi-layered characters, but its complex and multi-layered story. It doesn't just sit with one genre, that being the comic book genre, but multiple genres of cinema. The foundation of The Dark Knight is the decision to open as an extremely gritty crime drama, something I'd expect to see from someone like David Fincher with Zodiac or Michael Mann with Heat. Batman Begins also had this texture to it, but here in the very first act of The Dark Knight, we really see it come to fruition. A lot of this film is shot as a very dark thriller, and I'd even go as far as to say that some scenes are even more shocking and scary than some horror films. And of course, as a Batman film, we have some incredible action sequences that utilize real, practical effects, all with the aim of increasing the audience experience, and it works marvelously. I think all these elements combined just go to show how diverse of a director Chris Nolan truly is. And if this film alone isn't enough to demonstrate that to you, just take a look at his whole filmography. I feel like since The Dark Knight has all these different flavors, both the Nolan brothers are really able to experiment and do things with the story that us as the audience would never expect later on. The Dark Knight starts off with one of my favorite opening sequences to a film ever, and that of course is the bank heist. Through the killing of the whole robbery team with only the Joker left standing, we get this incredible sense of unpredictability, not just for the character but for the whole film. Then we don't see the Joker for about another 15 minutes, and in this time, Nolan establishes the effect of a Batman on Gotham since the first film. How organized crime rates are very low and how criminals on the street are running scared. We also have a great introduction to one of the most important characters in this film, and that of course is the new DA, Harvey Dent. He's very effective at putting criminals behind bars just like Batman, but he does it legally and within jurisdiction. The three-way relationship between Harvey Dent, Jim Gordon and Batman is the real backbone of this film, and in this first act we get such a great look at how effective they are at fighting the mob and cleaning up the streets of Gotham. Altogether, this brilliantly sets up the calm before the storm of course being the Joker. Now, I'll get on to Heath Ledger in just a moment, but I just want to talk about why this villain, for me, is the best I've certainly ever seen in a film before. Through Alfred's incredible monologue about how some men just want to watch the world burn, we understand that the Joker is an antagonist of a completely different caliber. He can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Through his acts of terrorizing Gotham, we slowly learn that the Joker isn't just a character but a symbol, just like our hero. In Batman Begins, Bruce expresses that he wants to become a symbol that is incorruptible and everlasting. Batman is a symbol for justice, and the Joker is a symbol for one thing and one thing only: anarchy. The thing is, I think everyone will agree that the Joker is a great villain, but I think the reason as to why this is because he is the perfect villain to the protagonist Batman. Batman has always been a superhero who is unlike any other, and that's because of his dark and disturbing past. Inside this character, there is so much rage and pain, and what makes Batman so different from, say, Superman or Spider-Man is his ability to channel that rage and pain into something good for his city. But at the end of the day, what he is doing is still unlawful and very questionable, and as a result, he's constantly treading a very dangerous line and essentially playing with fire. But the one rule that always stops him from crossing that line is the rule not to kill. One of the main functions of the Joker in this film is to really test that rule, and that, guys, is just a fucking compelling narrative to follow. See guys, the thing is, the genius of the Joker character is that there comes a point in this film where he realizes that Batman will not kill him. The unstoppable force truly meets the immovable object, and after forcing our hero into situation after situation of having to choose, and then realizing Batman will not give in, he turns to the White Knight, Harvey Dent. This is when I knew that I was witnessing the greatest villain of all time. He didn't just create a whole new villain, he transformed a character who was the embodiment of justice and good, even more than Batman, and completely demolished his belief system and vision for a better Gotham. And in doing so, he made a monster. He doesn't just attack Batman, he attacks Harvey Dent. This is just absolutely incredible writing and propelled characterization. Okay guys, let's talk about Heath Ledger. Last week, in preparation for this video and the videos I've been making during the week, I rewatched the entire Dark Knight trilogy in one day. Later that night, I watched the 81st Academy Awards, in particular the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for Heath Ledger's performance of the Joker in The Dark Knight. I honestly don't know what came over me, but whilst watching the acceptance speech given by his family, I shed a few tears. I was confused as to why I was having such a moment now of all times. It's not like this was the first time I'd ever seen this video on this specific Oscar. I then realized the reason I got so emotional is just because, as a lover of this art, the art of cinema that is, I can't help but really feel Heath's absence. Since 2008, I've seen so many countless incredible and unforgettable films, but for me, the fact that I can get emotional over someone I've never even seen or met speaks volumes for the impact his performance in this film truly had on me as a lover of film, as well as the caliber of actor he truly was. His performance here is one that every time I watch, it's almost as if I'm watching it for the first time. Unpredictable, powerful, magnetic, complex, iconic, thrilling, perfect. These are all words that I associate with this performance. Heath Ledger's Joker is my favourite performance by an actor ever, and it's no question that when he died, he took a piece of film, of my film experience with him. I'd have to say that the interrogation scene in The Dark Knight to this day remains my favourite scene in a film ever. My god, what I would have given to be a fly on the wall during the filming of this scene. The level of acting here for me is unparalleled, and I'm a mere mortal watching a god tier actor do what he was born to do. The cinematography by Wally Pfister, particularly here at the start, is just incredible. The Joker here just looks like a head floating about as if he is untouchable. And this shot here of Gordon, I might be looking into a bit too much, but for me there's foreshadowing of Harvey's turn into Two-Face. The irony in this scene is that Joker is the one who is the prisoner, but he truly is the one with all the power. Never, I repeat, never have I seen the hero in desperation like Batman is in this moment. The Joker can't beat Batman on a physical level, so he takes him to a completely different playing field and breaks him in such a psychologically detrimental way that I can't help but be in shock just every single time I watch this film. I think other writers should take a page out of the Nolan brothers book here. Also, the fact that Christian Bale is actually hitting Heath Ledger here just blows my mind to see the level of commitment that was shown. I think that it's easy to forget how many other incredible things that this film has just because of how extraordinary the Joker was. So very quickly, here are some things that I've listed. Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon and Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent give such brilliant performances, and so does Maggie Gyllenhaal as Rachel Dawes. I prefer her a lot more to Katie Holmes' version. She provided a great new dynamic to the characters of both Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne, and when she died, watching the film for the first time, I was kind of in denial that her character had actually gone. The Batmobile chase sequence from the first film was topped with an absolutely insane introduction of the Batpod. A lot of action sequences in The Dark Knight are just some of my favourite, and once again, I think it's the filmmaking choices to shoot as much as possible in camera, only using special effects to enhance the practical set pieces. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard outdo themselves with the musical score here, helping to constantly keep you riveted from the moment the film starts. And lastly, the ending to this movie is just so bittersweet but brilliant at the same time. In the final act, you get to see both Batman and the Joker fighting for Gotham's soul. Like ultimatums have been forced upon Batman constantly throughout the runtime, the Joker turns to the people of Gotham. The whole boat scenario was just genius and once again poses greater questions to the audience about human morale in times of pure anarchy. This all goes back to the Joker being an agent of chaos and how he has unsettled the established order. Harvey's transformation into Two-Face is so disturbing and at the same time truly heartbreaking to see. He's a new villain who really forms in the final act, but it doesn't feel forced at all. This is the amazing thing about The Dark Knight. In a story of so many different characters, Christopher Nolan is really able to find the right balance where he can showcase everyone's perspectives and motivations, and in doing so, makes you really care for the characters and the choices they make. The line, "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain," is really personified through the actions of the Batman, Gordon and Two-Face trio. In the end, even though Batman or the people of Gotham never truly give in to the wrong choice, the Joker wins because the White Knight falls and the Dark Knight rises. Wait, hold on. Did someone just say the Dark Knight rises? You know, I really don't understand why this film is so overlooked. I mean, I guess it has something to do with the fact that the previous entry was one of the greatest films in existence, but nevertheless, I really don't see The Dark Knight Rises get the love it deserves. For me, it truly is the perfect conclusion to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. We start off with what Chris Nolan does best, and that comes in the form of an absolutely mind-blowing practical action set piece on a plane. Similar to the impact of the bank heist at the beginning of The Dark Knight, this plane hijack sequence gives us a brilliant introduction to the main villain for this film, and that of course is Tom Hardy's Bane. I don't think you can really compare the Joker and Bane since they're both completely different characters, but by no means is Bane a disappointing follow-up to the Joker. He's extremely muscular, menacing, and brutal in every sense of the word. I said this in my review for the film, but I really love the sound design for Bane's character. It's so overpowering and a great reflection of how dominating he is as an antagonist. Like Heath Ledger's Joker, Tom Hardy's Bane naturally just commands every frame that he is in. He's potent in both strategy and physical combat, and therefore matches and even surpasses Batman almost instantaneously. Speaking of Batman, The Dark Knight Rises opens 8 years after the events of The Dark Knight. We see how the lie created by both Batman and Gordon has had numerous benefits in making Gotham a safer place, but at the same time we see the toll it has taken on the both of them. Gordon can no longer live with the lie and his days as commissioner are coming to an end. On the other hand, with Bruce, we only see the shadow of a man who once was. He's not moved on, he's lost the will to live. He truly is at the lowest point in his life. He only returns because of the newly surfaced threat of Bane. Anne Hathaway as the cunning yet enticing Selina Kyle is a welcome new addition to the cast, and Catwoman in this film really did bring a new and refreshing essence to the trilogy. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, John Blake, stands out to me a lot as well. Amongst all the tyranny and evil present in The Dark Knight Rises, he, in many ways, is the one good person with no wrong. Now this could easily come off as boring and dull, but I like how his presence was in many ways a good representation of the theme of hope, someone who never stops believing in the Batman. Seeing Bruce and Fox back together like the old days brings a smile to my face every time I watch this film. And of course I can't talk about Fox without bringing up the Bat. Chris Nolan and the production department have once again outdone themselves because the Bat is just amazing, and it's also given a greater purpose than to just blow shit up. It's essential in defeating the mercenaries, and it's essential in taking the bomb and saving Gotham. Now, one of the biggest complaints of the Dark Knight trilogy is the lack of good fight scenes. Batman is a martial artist, but the hand-to-hand combat scenes have always been mediocre at best. My response to this is, yes, while I agree with this complaint to an extent, for me this is not the Gotham City you know from the comics. It's Chris Nolan's Gotham City, one that is grounded in reality and a very honest depiction of our actual society. Think about it. If Batman were to start jumping around and doing a bunch of flips, It just wouldn't sit right with the vision of these three films. Instead, there is more focus on how Batman uses his brains, his will, and his resourcefulness to fight the forces of injustice, as opposed to using a variety of martial arts. However, this brings me onto none other than the sewer fight scene in The Dark Knight Rises. This is, for me, the best fight scene in the whole trilogy, even though it is essentially Batman getting his ass whooped. The brutality in the combat is such that you can feel every punch and kick being thrown. Those are the kind of fights that really impress me. The score is absent in the majority of this scene, and it's just such a great way to demonstrate how helpless and how outmatched Batman truly is here. We as the viewer are in the same position as Catwoman, locked outside the cage and able to do nothing but watch in shock. And the thing is, even though you know Batman will eventually come back, it's horrifying to see Bane strip Batman of everything: his resources, his spirit, his body. Also, notice how each main villain of these three films represents a key theme. With Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins, it was fear. With the Joker in The Dark Knight, it was chaos. And with Bane here in The Dark Knight Rises, it is pain. Also, I love how this moment is taken straight out of the pages of the comics. One of the biggest reasons why I believe The Dark Knight Rises is not just good, but great, is that it serves as just utter satisfaction and finality to the story started back in 2005. I think the main way it does this is its ability to build bridges to both The Dark Knight and, more specifically, Batman Begins. Chris Nolan really finds a strong balance between having story traits that are familiar with the previous two installments, but also having enough new material and stakes to call this a completely different Batman film. Its main connection with The Dark Knight is seen with the lie about Harvey Dent. Bane pulls the pin on this, and the revelation has severe consequences for Gotham, elevating the moral atmosphere to a whole new level. Having said this, what I love even more than the connection to The Dark Knight is the connection to Batman Begins. The Dark Knight Rises is undoubtedly the biggest of the three Batman films in terms of sheer scale and stakes, and the way that it is so successful in creating this atmosphere is how it ties the trilogy together by going back to basics with Batman Begins. Look at the main villain Bane. He comes from the same background as Bruce, he trained with the League of Shadows, and his connection to the past is amplified even more with the twist that Miranda Tate is indeed Talia al Ghul. The villainy has the same flavour reminiscent of the League's threat in Batman Begins, but this time it is so much more than that. The biggest arc of this film, and arguably this whole trilogy, comes with Bruce's character in The Dark Knight Rises. He has to learn what it takes to be Batman once again, to defeat pure evil and save his city. So how does Chris Nolan do this? Well, ladies and gentlemen, he gives us the pit. This is the embodiment of hell on earth, and when Bane breaks Batman, he condemns him to this hell to suffer and watch his city burn from afar. But the pit is much more than this. It is the greatest challenge Bruce has ever faced, but it is so much more personal. Not only is the pit the embodiment of hell, but more importantly, it is the embodiment of Bruce's hell. Look at this, and look at this. The pit is essentially the same well that he fell down as a kid when he first found his fear of bats. It's just a genius writing choice in my opinion. Again and again, Bruce tries to make the climb, but fails time and time again. He's blinded by arrogance and anger, the same arrogance and anger that condemned him to this place. When he fights Bane for the first time, he is overcome with emotion, and it blinds him. For the first time, Batman doesn't fight smart, and he suffers the consequences as a result. It is only when he abandons his arrogance and his anger and finds the fear of death that gives him the ability to escape. And guys, I cannot tell you how much this scene means to me. It is easily one of my favorite scenes in a film ever. I get so emotional every single time I watch it. The direction, the cinematography, the writing, the score is all at their apex here when Bruce finally makes the jump. The words, "Why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves up again," are so significant and work in combination with the events happening on screen so beautifully. Just before Bruce starts climbing, he asks what the meaning of the prisoner chants are, and the old man replies, "Rise." This then starts the build-up alongside Hans Zimmer's incredible score. I often watch this scene to get pumped, motivated, and inspired. It's the peak moment of one of the key messages of this film, and that is to persevere and to never give up. One thing in this scene that gets me every single time is that when Bruce makes it to the ledge, just before making the jump, bats fly out of one of the holes. The last time when he was in a pit was when he was a kid, and bats attacked him, giving him the fear of them. Now, as a man, the bats guide him and give him the courage to make the jump and escape from hell. That is just genius levels of storytelling. This is the point at which the true symbol is born. Bruce becomes more than just a man, Batman becomes a legend, and the Dark Knight rises. Bruce returns to Gotham just in time to free the trapped police force and amass an army for an all-out assault on Bane and his forces. I want to bring your attention to such a cool little moment just here. Just look at this. The whole death by exile sentence is done over the frozen river, whereby anyone who goes on it falls and drowns or freezes to their death. But when Batman returns, he is so flawlessly able to walk on the frozen river. So why is this? No one ever really asks. But if you really look for the answer, you will find it in Batman Begins. The whole training section in Batman Begins was done on frozen ice. Now, if this isn't phenomenal storytelling, I don't know what is, because the level of connectivity and attention to detail that Chris Nolan has put into this film blows my mind. And then of course we have the massive climactic battle and the twist. This is all accompanied by the ticking time bomb, which adds a whole nother level of intensity to the final act. Batman, with the help of Catwoman, is able to defeat Bane, Talia al Ghul and the mercenaries in brilliant spectacle. Bruce then takes the bomb and saves his city, allegedly dying in the process. We never see him die, but it is posed as the most probable outcome. Now, the last 5 or 6 minutes of this film are, for me, perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better ending to one of the greatest trilogies of films of all time. Michael Caine as Alfred standing over the graves of the Waynes has made me tear up many a time. The funeral scene is then followed by this moment of the Gotham statue of Batman being showed for the first time, and I heard that Chris Nolan actually positioned the seating here in the shape of a smile to pay tribute to Heath Ledger's Joker, which I just think is amazing. Wayne Manor is then used as an orphanage for Gotham children, which ties amazingly well with the fact that Bruce of course became an orphan. Fans smile as Blake's real name is revealed to be Robin. Then, what comes next is some of the most satisfying writing I've ever seen for a film. Blake, or Robin, is led to the Batcave just before the credits pull up, leaving us to our own imagination of what could or what would have happened. What I really love about the ending to The Dark Knight Rises is that Bruce leaves little keys for his original allies that he is truly alive. With Lucius, it's the revelation that Bruce fixed the autopilot system. With Gordon, the Batman signal is no longer destroyed. And the most satisfying comes with Alfred, where he of course sees Bruce just the way he imagined him in his travels, settled down and with a wife. In this case, it's Selina Kyle, which also gives finality on her arc. And to those of you who think that this wasn't real, it was. There is no denying it. If you think about it, for what reason would Alfred imagine Selina Kyle to be settled down with Bruce? He wasn't in Gotham during the majority of the film to acknowledge their romantic relationship, so what he is seeing here is 100% real. In the end, Bruce's mission is all but complete. Alfred's hope for a better life for him is finally in motion. The city is at peace and the Batman legacy lives on with Robin, Commissioner Gordon, and the people of Gotham. The Dark Knight has risen. Guys, overall this is a set of films that I will never stop watching until I die. It changed my perspective not just on comic book based films but on all films as an art form. Chris Nolan and everyone who has worked on these films over the course of the 10 years has given people like myself some truly unforgettable memories and a story that will live long in the halls of cinema as one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Guys, if you have made it this far into the video, please go ahead and leave a like and comment your thoughts on the Dark Knight trilogy. I would really love to know what you think. If you are new to the channel, guys, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, especially if you love movies. As always, thank you for watching, guys, and I will catch you very soon for another video.